time once again for Uncle Matt's bedtime story. Hello everybody, it's Uncle Matt and I'm here to read you another bedtime story. And tonight's bedtime story is a true story. It's called Explosion Newsie, written by Jacqueline Halsey and illustrated by Loretta Migani. And this story was copyright in 2015. A little bit of background here. We're reading this story on December 6th. The year right now is 2022. But back in the day, back in December 6th of 1917, I'm going to read a little cover here. Mackie is a Halifax Newsie, delivering the paper in his neighborhood every day. But on December 6, 1917, two ships collide in the busy wartime harbor of his city. The resulting explosion is the biggest man-made blast the world has ever seen. Mackie still has a job to do. It's now more important than ever to get the news out. Here we go. Explosion Newsie. So, before smartphones, computers, televisions, radios, the news came from newspapers. Distributed by boys or girls, Mackie was a newsboy. The worst newsboy ever. On a shivery, dark December morning, 9-year-old Mackie raced to Smallwood's drugstore. He collected his bundle of newspapers and pedaled up the steep, rutted road to the first house on his route. He wedged a newspaper under the doormat, then puffed along to the next house. Suddenly a dog leapt out of the shadows. Mackie's bike wobbled and tipped. Oh no! Now look what you made me do. Mackie scooped up the spilled newspapers, wiped them off, and continued on his route. Fussy Miss Tuff's house was Mackie's last stop. She complained about everything. Mackie tossed the newspaper onto her porch, then raced off as fast as he could. He got to the gate just as her door opened. Come back, this paper's filthy, she squeaked. Mackie sped up. Mackie met his friend Gus, and they biked down the hill to Halifax. The wartime harbor town was bustling, men tottering the gangplanks with huge sacks on their shoulders while stores opened their shutters. The ferry boat from Dartmouth steered through a maze of barges, fishing boats, and warships to Halifax side of the harbor. Mackie wanted to spend the whole day watching the battleships, but Ma needed his money. Come on, Gus, he said. We've got papers to sell. On every corner of town, newsboys and girls from the Chronicle and Herald outshouted each other for customers, so two competing newspapers. Mackie stood out by the City Hall clock tower. Latest war news from France, he chanted to the rush of passing workers. He'd only sold a few papers when Edna, the toughest girl Mackie knew, marched up and breathed in his face. Move, she growled. This was my brother's spot. Now it's mine, stammered Mackie, wishing that Rob wasn't working at the factory and could defend himself. Edna shoved him. Wanna fight? Mackie edged away. He didn't like fighting. With The best spots all taken, Mackie ended up on a corner with few customers. As the long jury hours passed, Mackie thought about his pa fighting in France. He wondered if fighting made Pa miserable too. It grew dark and Mackie was hungry. Who needs stupid newspapers anyway, he said, dumping them over a wall. At home, Mackie tipped out his coins. Is that all your takings? Demanded Rob. He gave him a hard look. He gave him a hard look. You've lost my spot, haven't you? Mackie slumped down at the table. Honestly, Mackie, you're the worst newsboy ever. And you're the worst brother ever. Go easy, Rob, said Ma. He's not had the job long. Somehow, Ma being nice made Mackie feel worse. The next morning, Mr. Smallwood was waiting for Mackie. Late, Missed House's dirty papers. Any more complaints, Mackie MacDonald? And you're fired. I won't mess up today, promised Mackie, but he'd only delivered 2 papers when he heard the hiss of a flat tire. Rats. Mackie dragged his bike home, then trudged back out again. His papers were late, and Miss Tufts gave him a lecture. Mackie met Gus in their usual place. Quick, look down there. Whoa, hollered Mackie as one ship slammed into another. A wisp of smoke turned black and grew bigger. That ship's on fire, cried Gus. I've got to see this. He sped down the hill on his bike. Mackie scowled. He'd miss out on all the excitement, all because of a crummy flat tire. He watched the fire halls sparkling up into the huge... Let's read that again. Mackie met Gus in their usual place. Quick, look down there. Whoa, hollered Mackie as one ship slammed into another. A wisp of smoke turned black and grew bigger. That ship's on fire, cried Gus. I've got to see this. He sped down the hill on his bike, and Mackie scowled. He'd miss out on the excitement all because of a crummy flat tire. He watched the fireballs sparkling up into the huge black cloud. There was a brilliant flash, and read again. There was a brilliant flash, and an all-ear-splitting roar shook the ground. Mackie woke in a daze. He sat in the sooty rain, flinching as small pieces of hot metal fell on him. Cripes, Gus, what happened? Then he remembered. Gus had biked down to the harbor. Jumping over fallen telegraph wires and uprooted trees, Mackie ran downhill after his friend. Half the city was gone. The rest flattened or on fire. People stumbled out and about with blackened faces. Others dug frantically in the tarry wreckage for screaming survivors. Mackie saw Fred, a reporter from the Herald. Is the war here? He shouted over the sirens, whistles, and screams. War's been here all along. This wasn't an attack. Seems the Mont Blanc caught fire and exploded like a bomb, gasped Mackie. Thousands dead, injured, homeless. Fred wrote rapidly in his notebook as he talked. I've got to get this in tomorrow's paper. A newspaper tomorrow? We're printing a 1-page newspaper on an old hand-printing press. People have to know what happened. Watch out, Fred yanked Mackie out of the way as a wagon full of injured people rushed by. Go home, Mackie. On his way home, Mackie spotted Gus's news bag snagged in a collapsed building. Gus, you under there? Help, screamed Gus. I'm stuck. I'll get you out, said Mackie. With shaken hands, he cleared away the debris and made a gap big enough for Gus to squeeze through. You okay? Too scary here. Let's go home, said Gus. At Mackie's house, Ma was nailing quilts over the smashed windows. The hill saved us from the worst of the blast, she explained, but the children got badly cut from the flying glass. Night came, and Rob didn't come home. Early next morning, Mackie walked to the Herald office. It was very cold, and tiny snowflakes spun in his huffy breath. He climbed through the jagged doorway and picked his way toward the thump of the old printing press. "What the heck are you doing here?" exclaimed Fred. "If it's important to print the news, it's important to deliver it," Mackie said with a shrug. "My brother says I'm the worst newsboy ever, but it looks like that's all you've got." Fred's weary face cracked into a smile. He dumped a pile of newspapers into Mackie's arms. "It's going to be grim reading." Battling fierce, snowy gusts, Mackie delivered newspapers to the big hotels. Then he took the rest to the commons, where the military had set up tents for the homeless. "Halifax wrecked," he yelled. Everyone wanted a copy. Mackie saved a newspaper for his ma. "Rob must be lying injured somewhere," a tear rolled down her cheek. "Don't cry, Ma. If he's hurt, he'll be at a hospital or relief center. Reporters are making lists of where everybody is. We'll find Rob's name in tomorrow's paper." A foot of snow lay on the ground the next morning. Edna was at the Herald office along with Gus and the other newsboys. Funny, she didn't seem scary anymore. Mackie needed his sled to get to his regular customers. When he finished his route, Mackie met up with Gus and Edna, and together they hollered the headlines around the wrecked streets of Halifax. The list of dead and wounded grew longer every day. There was still no news of Rob. "It's going to take time to collect all the names," said Fred. "Come here, boy." Oh, it was Miss Tufts. "Will you see if my niece Cordelia is in the newspaper? It's been over a week. I can't bear to look anymore." "My brother's missing too," said Mackie. "I told him he was the worst brother ever, but I didn't mean it." Mackie opened the pages. "Here, Cordelia Tufts, the Nova Scotia Hospital in Dartmouth." "Will you come with me?" asked Miss Tufts. Mackie agreed, and that afternoon they caught the ferry boat across the harbor. While Miss Tufts visited Cordelia, Mackie waited by the door. The stink of the overcrowded hospital made his stomach churn. A nurse thrust a magazine at him. "Don't just stand there. Go read to that patient. He lost an eye and is in shock. We don't know his name." As Mackie began to read, the patient began to tremble. Then in a croaky whisper, the patient said, "Is that the worst newsboy ever?" Mackie's eyes grew round. "Best brother finder ever, you mean?" Cool. He found his brother. A week later, the family brought Rob home. The sound of hammering was everywhere. Mackie smiled. The city's beginning to mend, and so is my brother. The end. Explosion Newsie. Well, that's all the time we have for Uncle Matt's bedtime story. I hope you enjoyed that story. I hope you learned something from that story. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.